All right, today we're diving into the economic portraits of Trump and Modi, which presents a really fascinating idea. What if you could understand two of the world's most powerful leaders, not through complex political theory, but through a famous personal finance book? Yeah, you heard that right.
I mean, that's a pretty wild question, right? Can a popular finance book really explain the actions of world leaders? Well, the source we're digging into today argues, yeah, it can. The claim is that the core concepts from Rich Dad, Poor Dad give us this incredibly powerful new lens to understand their economic thinking. It's definitely an unusual take, so let's see how it plays out.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with this surprising framework. Then we'll get into the portraits of the rich dad and the poor dad. We'll compare the two models, and finally, we'll look at the way forward that the source proposes.
So, let's jump right into section 1, a surprising framework. And we've got to be clear from the get-go. This is not your typical political analysis, not even close. The entire argument we're looking at is built on a book about personal finance, not on traditional theories of statecraft or ideology.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't read the book, here's the gist of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad framework. It basically says there are two totally different mindsets about money. You've got the poor dad mindset. This is the traditional path, right? Go to school, get good grades, find a safe, secure job. It's all about job security and working for your money. Then you have the rich dad mindset. This one's different. It's all about building and buying assets, things that make money for you, even when you're sleeping. The goal here isn't just a paycheck. It's financial independence.
All right, so how on earth does this apply to a world leader? Well, this is where it gets interesting. The source kicks off its analysis by looking at Donald Trump, casting him as the first of these two archetypes.
And yep, you guessed it. In this analysis, Donald Trump is basically the rich dad, but on a massive national scale.
So what does that actually mean? The source points to these specific traits. First, a transactional personality. Everything is a deal. International relations are seen less as diplomacy and more as business negotiations. The economic model. It's all about leveraging assets, the country's assets, branding, and real estate for a return. And when a problem comes up, the approach is to treat it like a negotiation you have to win. Think about something like renegotiating a trade deal. From this perspective, it's not really a deep policy shift. It's more like a businessman looking at an old contract and saying, nope, we can get a better deal. The whole point, according to this view, is to grow the nation's net worth, just like a company.
Okay, so that's one portrait. Now let's flip to the other side of the coin. The source takes the same framework and applies it to India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
And in this framework, Narendra Modi is cast as the poor dad. Now, it's super important to understand. This isn't a critique or a negative label about wealth, not at all. It's purely an analysis of the mindset and the fundamental approach to running a country's economy.
And wow, the traits highlighted here are a complete 180. The personality is described as service-oriented, really focused on national duty. The economic model, it prioritizes things like government programs and growing the number of stable, salaried jobs for people. For example, a program like Make in India fits this perfectly. The goal isn't high-risk asset plays. It's about creating steady, reliable employment. So when there's a challenge, the solution is through policy and bureaucracy. And the main focus is just responsibly managing the national budget, almost like the head of a huge household, making sure the bills are paid and everyone feels secure.
So, that brings us right to the heart of the analysis, putting these two models side by side. When you look at them together, the source argues you're seeing two completely different blueprints for economic leadership. And this slide really boils it all down. The fundamental question is this: do you see your country as a giant business that needs to be managed for profit and growth, or do you see it as a giant household that needs to be managed for security and stability? The source claims that this one difference in perspective is the absolute key to unlocking why these leaders act the way they do and what it means for everyone living in those countries. And check out this table. It lays out the practical differences so clearly. Let's just go down the line. For the primary goal, you have asset accumulation versus fiscal management. Totally different. For strategy, it's deregulation in deals versus policy and programs. And of course, that leads to a different risk profile, right? One is high risk, high reward. The other is much more cautious and conservative. And maybe most importantly, how do they even define success? For one, it's all about GDP growth and market value. For the other, it's social welfare and stability. Just fundamentally different worlds.
Okay, so after laying all of this out, what's the big takeaway? Where do we go from here? Well, the source doesn't just drop this analysis on us and walk away. It actually proposes a way forward, a way for us to use this framework.
And the source is pretty direct about its goal. As you can see from this quote,
to educate us with real facts and way forward. So the whole idea is that this framework isn't just an interesting theory, it's supposed to be a practical tool for us to understand things more clearly. So here's what that way forward actually looks like, according to the source. Step 1, just understand both mindsets. Recognize that each one has its own logic. They're just different. Step 2, get good at seeing how a leader's personal money-making model directly shapes their national policies. And finally, step 3, try to analyze what's happening in the world through this economic framework, not just a political one. Basically look past the headlines and the political drama to see the core financial thinking that's really driving the decisions.
So, in the end, the source doesn't actually tell us which one is better. It doesn't pick a winner. Instead, it just gives us this new tool, this new way of looking at things. And it leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. Which model really offers the better path forward? A nation run like a business, or a nation run like a household? It's definitely something to chew on. Thanks for watching.